Jake Martinez stepped off the transport ship and felt his boots hit the metal floor of Kepler Station. The air tasted like oil and something else he could not name. It was cold here, much colder than the warm Earth ship he had just left. His breath came out in small clouds as he looked around the docking bay. The station was huge. Metal walls stretched up so high he could barely see the ceiling. Strange lights hung from thick cables, casting weird shadows everywhere. The whole place hummed with the sound of machines working deep inside the walls. Jake had never seen anything like it. Other beings moved around the docking bay. Some walked on two legs like humans, but they were much taller and covered in scales that looked like armor. Others had 4 arms and skin that changed colors as they moved. A few had no legs at all, just floating above the ground on some kind of invisible force. Jake tried not to stare, but it was hard not to look. You must be the human. Jake turned around fast. Standing behind him was the biggest living thing he had ever seen. It was at least 8 feet tall, maybe more. Its skin was dark green and covered in scales that looked sharp enough to cut glass. 2 yellow eyes stared down at him from a face that looked like it belonged on a dragon from old Earth stories. "Yes, sir," Jake said. He tried to keep his voice steady. "I am Jake Martinez." The creature made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like rocks grinding together. "I am Commander Thexka. I will be your instructor while you are here. I have heard much about humans. Small, weak, soft creatures that break easily. We will see if this is true." Jake said nothing. He had been warned about this. The Vorthek, the race that ran this station, did not think much of humans. They saw Earth people as weak and useless. That was part of why Jake was here. Someone had to prove them wrong. "Follow me," Thexka said. He turned and walked toward a large door at the far end of the docking bay. Jake had to take 2 steps for every one of the big alien steps just to keep up. They walked through long halls filled with more strange beings. Some were bigger than Thexka, others smaller than Jake. All of them stopped what they were doing to stare at the human. Jake heard whispers in languages he did not understand, but he could guess what they were saying. "Look at the weak human. Look how small he is. How long will he last here?" "This is where you will sleep," Thexka said, stopping in front of a small door. "You will wake up when the lights come on. You will eat when the food is ready. You will train when I tell you to train. If you cannot do these things, you will be sent home. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Jake said. "Good. Rest now. Tomorrow we begin." The door slid open and Jake stepped inside. The room was tiny, just big enough for a bed and a small table. There was no window, just 4 metal walls and a ceiling that seemed too low. The door closed behind him with a sound like a prison cell locking. Jake sat on the bed and looked around. His new home. The mattress was thin and hard. The blanket was rough and smelled like chemicals. This was going to be harder than he thought. The lights went out without warning, leaving Jake in complete darkness. He lay down and tried to sleep, but the sounds of the station kept him awake. Metal creaked and groaned. Strange voices echoed through the walls. Something that sounded like screaming came from somewhere far away, then stopped suddenly. Jake closed his eyes and thought about home. About the green hills of Earth and the warm sun on his face. About his family and friends who were counting on him to succeed here. He could not fail. He would not fail. The lights came on suddenly, so bright that Jake had to cover his eyes. He looked around and saw that there was no clock, no way to tell how long he had been asleep. It felt like minutes, but it could have been hours. "Up, now." Thexka's voice came from a speaker in the wall. "Training begins." Jake got dressed quickly and stepped out of his room. The hallway was full of other beings, all walking in the same direction. None of them looked at him, but Jake could feel their eyes on him anyway. They walked into a huge room with a high ceiling and walls covered in weapons. The floor was made of some kind of black material that felt soft under Jake's feet. Other recruits stood in lines, all facing the same direction. Jake found an empty spot at the back and stood as straight as he could. Thexka walked to the front of the room. Even among all these big aliens, he stood out. His scales seemed to shine under the bright lights. His yellow eyes looked over the crowd of recruits like he was deciding which one to eat first. "Today we begin combat training," he said. His voice was loud enough to fill the whole room without shouting. "Most of you will fail. Some of you will be injured. A few of you might die. This is normal. This is how we learn." Jake felt his heart beat faster. He had trained in combat on Earth, but this sounded different. This sounded real. "I need a volunteer," Thexka said. His eyes moved over the crowd of recruits. "Someone to show the others how this works." No one moved. No one spoke. The room was so quiet Jake could hear his own breathing. "No volunteers?" Thexka's mouth opened, showing teeth that looked like knives. "Then I will choose." His yellow eyes stopped moving. They were looking right at Jake. "The human will do." Jake felt every eye in the room turn to look at him. He wanted to run, but his legs would not move. He wanted to hide, but there was nowhere to go. "Come here, human," Thexka said. "Let us see what Earth has sent us." Jake walked to the front of the room. Each step felt like it took forever. The other recruits watched him like he was walking to his own death. Maybe he was. "What is your name, human?" "Jake Martinez, sir." "Jake Martinez," Thexka repeated. He said it like it was funny. "Do you know why you are here, Jake Martinez?" "To train, sir." To learn what?" Jake thought about the right answer. "To learn how to fight, sir." "Good, we will start with something simple." "Hit me," Jake blinked. "Sir? Hit me, use your hands. Show me how humans fight." Jake looked around the room. Every recruit was watching. Every eye was on him. He could not back down now. He made his hand into a fist and threw a punch at Thexka's chest. It was a good punch, fast and hard. On Earth, it would have dropped most men. Thexka did not move. Jake's fist hit the alien's chest and bounced off like it had hit a wall. The scales did not even show a mark. "Is that all?" Thexka asked before Jake could answer. The alien's big hand moved faster than Jake thought possible. It hit him in the face like a hammer. Jake felt something break in his nose. Blood started pouring down his face and onto his shirt. Jake stumbled backward but did not fall. His nose felt like it was on fire. Blood filled his mouth and made everything taste like metal. The room spun around him, but he stayed on his feet. "Pathetic," Thexka said. "As I expected." Jake wiped blood from his face with the back of his hand. His nose was definitely broken. It hurt to breathe. But he was still standing. "What is the next exercise, sir?" Jake asked. The room went silent. Even Thexka looked surprised. The other recruits stared at Jake like he had grown another head. "What did you say?" "I asked what the next exercise is, sir." Jake's voice was thick because of the blood in his nose, but he spoke clearly. "I am here to train, so let us train." Thexka's yellow eyes narrowed. He stared at Jake for a long moment like he was trying to figure out if this was some kind of trick. "Interesting," he said finally. "Very interesting indeed." 3 weeks had passed since Jake's first day at Kepler Station. His nose had healed crooked, leaving a permanent reminder of his meeting with Commander Thexka. But that was just the beginning of his problems. Every morning, Jake woke up to pain. His ribs ached from combat training. His muscles burned from carrying heavy weights up endless stairs. His hands were covered in cuts from weapon practice. Sleep came in short pieces, never enough to let his body heal properly. The other recruits had started to notice something strange about the human. Most new arrivals lasted only a few days before they broke down crying or ran away in the middle of the night. Jake had been here for 3 weeks and still showed up for training every morning. "Place your bets," said Korax, a four-armed being from the Zelen system. He spoke in the common galactic language that all the recruits used to talk to each other. "How many more days before the human quits?" 2 days, said Vex, who looked like a walking tree with too many eyes. "Maybe 3 if he is really stupid." "I say 1 day," added Nyx, a creature that seemed to be made of living metal. "Thexka has something special planned for him today. I heard the instructors talking." Jake pretended not to hear them as he walked past their table in the eating hall. He had learned to ignore the betting pools and the whispers. The other recruits were not mean to him, But they did not understand why he kept coming back for more punishment. The food at the station was terrible. It was some kind of gray paste that tasted like wet cardboard and had the texture of mud. Jake ate it anyway. He needed the energy for whatever Thexka had planned. "Human!" a voice called from behind him. Jake turned to see Dex, a reptilian being, who was almost as big as Thexka but covered in blue scales instead of green. "Why do you keep doing this to yourself?" "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "This training. This pain. You could go home anytime you want. Your people would not blame you." "Everyone here knows the Vorthic training is meant to break spirits, not build them." Jake thought about this for a moment. "If I go home now, nothing changes. Humans will still be seen as weak. The next human who comes here will face the same treatment, maybe worse." "So you suffer for others?" "I suffer so others might not have to." Dex shook his head. "Your species is very strange." Jake finished his meal and headed to the training hall. He was early, as always. He used the extra time to study the room, too. Memorize where everything was placed. The weapons on the walls, the training equipment, the exits. He had learned that knowing his surroundings could mean the difference between a beating and a hospital visit. Thexka entered the hall exactly on time. He never came early, never came late. The big alien looked around the room until his yellow eyes found Jake. "Today we work on endurance," Thexka announced. "You will run the outer ring of the station, all of you. The last one to finish will face punishment." The outer ring was a path that went around the outside of the station. It was about 5 miles long and parts of it had no air, so runners had to wear breathing masks. The gravity was also set higher than normal, making every step feel like lifting weights. Jake had run the outer ring before. It was hard, but he could do it. The problem was that most of the other recruits were faster than him. Their longer legs or extra arms or natural speed meant they could cover ground much quicker than a human. "Begin," Thexka said. Jake started running. He did not try to keep up with the fastest runners. That would only tire him out early. Instead, he found a pace he could maintain and stuck to it. He had learned this lesson the hard way during his first week. The first mile was not too bad. Jake ran with his breathing mask on, taking steady breaths of the recycled air. His legs felt strong and his heart rate was good. He was in the middle of the pack, which was better than usual. By the second mile, some of the other recruits were already pulling ahead. Jake could see them in the distance, their forms getting smaller, as they rounded the curve of the station. He kept his pace steady and tried not to think about what would happen if he came in last. The third mile was where things got hard. The path went through a section where the artificial gravity was turned up even higher. Each step felt like he was carrying another person on his back. Several recruits slowed down here, but Jake had expected this. He had trained for it. He thought about his time in Earth's military. The long runs in full gear, the obstacle courses in the rain, the drill sergeants who screamed at him until his ears rang. Compared to that, this was just another day at work. By the fourth mile, Jake was no longer in the middle of the pack. He was closer to the back, but not last. 2 other recruits were behind him, both struggling with the heavy gravity section. Jake could hear them breathing hard through their masks. The 5th mile was the worst. The path went through a section where the station's heating system did not work properly. The air was so cold that Jake could see his breath even through the mask. His muscles started to cramp up. His lungs burned with each breath. One of the recruits behind him stopped running. Jake heard him fall to the ground, gasping for air. Left only one other recruit behind Jake. If that recruit finished before him, Jake would be last. Jake pushed himself harder. His legs felt like they were made of lead. His chest hurt with each breath, but he kept running. He had to keep running. The finish line came into view. Jake could see the other recruits who had already finished, standing around and watching the last few runners come in. Thexka was there too, his yellow eyes fixed on Jake. The recruit behind Jake started to sprint. Jake could hear his footsteps getting closer. The alien was gaining on him, getting ready to pass him in the final stretch. Jake found energy. He did Not know he had? He ran faster than he had ever run before? His heart felt like it might explode. His vision started to go dark around the edges. But he crossed the finish line one step ahead of the other recruit. Jake collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. His whole body shook from exhaustion. The other recruit fell down beside him, also breathing hard. Not bad, human, Dexka said, looking down at Jake, but not good enough. Sir, Jake managed to say between breaths, you finished second to last. In a real battle, second to last still means dead. Dexka's mouth opened to show his sharp teeth. Time for your punishment, Jake's heart sank. He had run as hard as he could, but it was not enough. Now he would face whatever punishment Dexka had planned. Stand up, Dexka ordered. Jake got to his feet slowly. His legs felt like they might give out at any moment. The other recruits formed a circle around him, watching to see what would happen. Hold out your hands, Dexka said. Jake held out his hands, palms up. Dexka pulled out a small device that looked like a metal rod with wires coming out of it. Jake had seen this device before. It was used to deliver electric shocks. This will hurt, Dexka said. But it will also teach you that being almost good enough is the same as being useless. The device touched Jake's palm. Electric pain shot through his entire body. Every muscle cramped at once. His teeth clenched so hard he thought they might break. The pain lasted for 10 seconds, but it felt like 10 hours. When it was over, Jake was still standing. His hands were shaking and his vision was blurry, but he had not fallen down. He had not cried out. He had not begged for mercy. Again, Dexka said, the second shock was worse than the first. Jake's body convulsed and he bit his tongue hard enough to draw blood, but when it was over he was still standing. Again. The third shock drove Jake to his knees. His whole body felt like it was on fire. Spots danced in front of his eyes. But he got back to his feet without being told. Dexka looked at him for a long moment. Interesting, he said finally. Very interesting. Jake said nothing. He could not trust his voice not to shake. Tomorrow we will work on weapons training, Dexka announced to all the recruits. Real weapons, sharp ones. Some of you will bleed. Some of you will be sent to the medical bay. This is normal. As the other recruits filed out of the training hall, Jake stayed behind. He needed a moment to steady himself before he could walk. Human, Dexka said. He had stayed behind too. Yes. Sir? Why do you keep coming back? Jake thought about the question. Because someone has to, sir. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I have, sir. Dexka stared at him with those yellow eyes. We will see how long that answer lasts. Jake walked back to his small room. Every step hurt. Every breath hurt, but he was still walking. He was still breathing. Tomorrow would bring new pain, new tests, new chances to prove that humans were not as weak as everyone thought. He lay down on his thin mattress and closed his eyes. In a few hours the lights would come on again. Training would begin again. Pain would begin again, but Jake would be ready. 6 weeks had passed since Jake arrived at Kepler Station. His body looked different now. He was thinner but harder, like a piece of metal that had been hammered into shape. Scars covered his arms and hands from weapons training. His face was always tired, but his eyes stayed sharp. The other recruits had stopped betting on when Jake would quit. Some of them had already given up and gone home. Others had been sent to the medical bay and never came back. Jake was still here, still showing. Up every morning when the lights came on. Today was different. Jake could feel it in the air. The instructors talked in quiet voices and looked at him more than usual. Something was coming, something worse than the daily beatings and shock treatments. Today we practice with live blades, Dexka announced. To the group of recruits. There were fewer of them now, only about 20 left from the original 50, real weapons. Sharp edges. If you are cut, you bleed. If you are stabbed, you die. Jake felt his stomach tighten. He had trained with practice weapons for weeks, but those were made of soft materials that could not kill. These new weapons were different. They gleamed under the lights like hungry teeth. Pick a partner, Dexka said. You will fight until one of you cannot continue. The recruits looked around at each other. Nobody wanted to be the first to choose. Fighting with real weapons was serious business. One mistake could mean permanent injury or death. "I will pick for you," Dexka said when nobody moved. His yellow eyes scanned the group. "Korax, you fight with Vex. Nyx, you fight with Dex, and the human ... His eyes stopped on Jake. "The human fights with me." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. Fighting another recruit was dangerous enough. Fighting with Dexka was suicide. The big alien was trained in combat, had years of experience, and was 3 times Jake's size. "Sir," Jake said carefully, "is that fair to the other recruits? They should have a chance to learn too." Dexka's mouth opened in what might have been a smile. "Fair? There is no fair in real combat, human. There is only alive and dead." He picked up a long blade that looked like it could cut through metal. "Choose your weapon." Jake walked to the weapons rack. His hands shook slightly as he looked at the different blades. Some were curved like swords from old Earth movies. Others were straight and thin like needles. A few had strange shapes he had never seen before. He picked up a knife that was about as long as his forearm. It felt heavy in his hand, but he could control it. The edge was so sharp it seemed to glow. "Good choice," Dexka said. "Quick and simple. No fancy moves needed." He held up his own weapon, a blade that was twice as long as Jake's. "Are you ready to die, human?" Jake took a deep breath. "Are you ready to try to kill me, sir?" The other recruits backed away, forming a circle around Jake and Dexka. Some of them looked scared. Others looked excited. All of them were watching to see what would happen when the small human faced the giant alien with real weapons. "Begin," Dexka said. He moved faster than Jake expected. The big blade came down like lightning, aimed at Jake's head. Jake threw himself to the side, feeling the wind from the weapon as it passed by his ear. Jake rolled on the ground and came up running. He could not stand and fight Dexka face to face. The alien was too strong, too fast. Jake had to move, had to use his size to his advantage. Dexka spun around and swung his blade in a wide arc. Jake ducked under it and tried to stab with his knife. The point hit Dexka's scaled skin but did not go through. It was like trying to cut stone. The alien's other hand came up and hit Jake in the chest. Jake flew backward and crashed into the wall. Stars exploded in his vision. He could taste blood in his mouth. "Too slow," Dexka said. "Too weak." Jake got to his feet. His ribs hurt where Dexka had hit him. Something might be broken, but he could still move. He still had his weapon. Dexka came at him again. This time Jake was ready. He waited until the last second, then stepped to the side and slashed with his knife. The blade caught Dexka across the arm, drawing a line of dark blood. The alien looked down at the cut, surprised. "You actually hit me." "Lucky shot," Jake said, but he was studying the wound. Dexka's scales were tough, but they could be cut if you hit them at the right angle. "Let us see if you can do it again." Dexka attacked with more fury this time. His blade moved so fast Jake could barely see it. Jake dodged and weaved, trying to stay away from the cutting edge, but he was getting tired. His breathing was getting harder. A blade caught him across the shoulder, opening a deep cut. Blood started to flow down his arm. Jake bit back a cry of pain and kept moving. Another cut opened on his leg. Then another on his back. Jake was bleeding from multiple wounds now, but he kept fighting. He had to find a way to hurt Dexka more than the alien was hurting him. Jake feinted to the left, then dove to the right. As Dexka turned to follow him, Jake's knife found the gap between 2 scales on the alien's thigh. The blade went in. Deep this time, Dexka roared in pain and anger. His fist came down like a hammer, hitting Jake in the back of the head. Jake's face hit the floor hard. Blood poured from his nose and mouth. "Stay down," Dexka said. "You have learned enough for today." Jake tried to get up, but his arms would not work properly. His vision was blurry and there was a ringing in his ears. He could feel blood pooling under his face. I said, "Stay down." Dexka's boot came down on Jake's back, pinning him to the floor. Jake tried to push himself up, but the weight was too much. His body felt like it was falling apart. His heart was beating too fast. Something was wrong inside him, something more than just cuts and bruises. Medical team to training hall 1, Vexka said into his communication device. We have injuries. Jake's vision started to go black around the edges. He could hear voices, but they seemed far away. Someone was rolling him over, checking his wounds. He tried to speak, but only blood came out of his mouth. Internal bleeding, someone said. Multiple organ damage. Neural trauma. We need to get him to surgery now. Jake felt himself being lifted onto something soft. The ceiling moved above him as they carried him through the halls. He tried to stay awake, tried to focus on the lights passing overhead, but darkness was pulling at him. The last thing he saw before passing out was Vexka's face, looking down at him with those yellow eyes. The alien's expression was strange, like he was seeing something he had not expected. Jake woke up 3 days later in the medical bay. His body was connected to machines that beeped and hummed. Tubes ran into his arms, feeding him liquids and medicines. He tried to sit up, but pain shot through his entire body. Do not move, a voice said. Jake turned his head and saw a medical technician, a small alien with too many eyes. You have been badly injured. You need to rest. How bad? Jake asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Bad enough that most beings would have died. Your internal organs were damaged. Your brain was swelling. You lost a lot of blood. The technician checked some readings on a machine, but you are healing. Slowly, but healing. Jake closed his eyes. He had survived, but barely. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was where he finally had to give up and go home. You have a visitor, the technician said. Jake opened his eyes to see Vexka standing beside his bed. The big alien looked different somehow, less sure of himself than usual. Human, Vexka said. Sir, why did you not stay down? When I told you to stay down, why did you keep trying to get up? Jake thought about the question. Because staying down is the same as giving up, sir. And I am not ready to give up. Vexka stared at him for a long moment. You should be dead. Any other being would be dead from those injuries. But I am not dead, sir. No, you are not. Vexka turned to leave, then stopped. When you are healed, training will continue. It will be harder than before. I understand, sir. Do you? Do you really understand what I am telling you? Jake met the alien's yellow eyes. You are telling me that you are going to try to kill me, sir. Yes, I am. Then I guess I will have to try not to die, sir. Vexka left without another word. Jake lay back in his bed and listened to the machines keeping him alive. His body was broken, but his mind was clear. He had survived the worst that Vexka could throw at him. He had taken damage that should have killed him and lived through it, but something had changed during that fight. Jake had seen something in Vexka's eyes, something that might have been respect. Or maybe it was fear. The alien had realized that the human was not going to break. No matter how much punishment he took, Jake closed his eyes and began to plan. When he got out of this medical bay, he would be ready. He would be stronger. He would be smarter. And, maybe, just maybe, he would be dangerous enough to win. The machines beeped softly as Jake drifted off to sleep. In his dreams, he was still fighting. Jake returned to training 2 weeks later with metal parts inside his body. The medical team had replaced his damaged organs with artificial ones that were stronger than the original parts. His broken ribs had been reinforced with titanium plates. His skull had metal mesh under the skin to protect his brain. He looked the same on the outside, but everything was different now. The pain that used to slow him down was just background noise. His artificial heart pumped blood more efficiently than a normal human heart. His enhanced lungs could process oxygen better than before, but the biggest change was not in his body. It was in his mind. Jake watched everything now. He studied how each instructor moved, how they fought, what made them angry or confident. He learned the patterns of the station when the guards changed shifts where the cameras could not see. He memorized the layout of every room, every hallway, every exit. Most importantly, he studied Vexka. The big alien had habits. He always entered the training hall from the same door. He always stood in the same spot when giving orders. He favored his right side when fighting and had a small blind spot on his left. His scales were weaker at the joints where they overlapped. Jake filed away every detail, building a map of weaknesses in his mind. "Combat practice," Vexka announced to the remaining recruits. There were only 12 of them left now. "Choose your opponents." Jake stepped forward before anyone else could move. "I would like to fight Korax, sir." Korax was one of the biggest recruits, almost as large as Vexka, but with 4 arms instead of 2. He had beaten every other recruit he had faced. Most beings were afraid to fight him. "You sure about that, human?" Korax asked. "I will not hold back just because you were in the medical bay." "I would not want you to," Jake said. They moved to the center of the practice area. Korax picked up 2 long clubs, one for each of his upper arms. Jake chose a single short sword, holding it in a way that looked awkward and uncomfortable. "Begin," Vexka said. Korax charged forward, swinging all 4 arms at once. It was like fighting a windmill made of muscle and bone. Jake seemed to stumble backward, barely avoiding the crushing blows. The other recruits watched as Jake appeared to panic, dodging wildly and nearly falling several times. It looked like he was about to be beaten badly, then something changed. Jake's next dodge was not desperate, it was precise. He moved just enough to avoid Korax's club, then stepped inside the alien's reach. His sword came up in a quick thrust that caught Korax between his middle and lower arm. Korax roared and swung with his free arms. But Jake was already moving, flowing around the attacks like water. His sword found another gap, then another. Each cut was small but exact, hitting spots where Korax could not easily defend. Within minutes, Korax was bleeding from a dozen wounds. None of them were deep enough to be dangerous, but they all hurt. They all slowed him down. "How are you doing this?" Korax gasped, backing away. Jake did not answer. He kept moving, kept cutting, kept finding new ways through Korax's defenses. His face was calm, almost empty. He looked like someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Korax tried one last desperate attack, throwing all 4 arms forward in a crushing embrace meant to break Jake's ribs. Jake dropped to the ground, rolled between the alien's legs, and came up behind him with his sword at Korax's throat. "Yield," Jake said quietly. Korax's 4 arms slowly raised in surrender. The training hall was completely silent. Every recruit stared at Jake like they had never seen him before. Even Vexka looked surprised. "How?" Vex asked. "Korax has never lost a fight." Jake lowered his sword. "I watched, I learned. I adapted." Over the next few days, Jake fought every other recruit in the training program. He beat them all. Not because he was stronger or faster, but because he had studied each of them until he knew exactly how they would move before they moved. Against Nyx, who was made of living metal, Jake used electrical attacks that disrupted his opponent's systems. Against Vex, who could change colors to blend with his surroundings, Jake fought with his eyes closed and relied on sound and air movement to track his target. Each victory was different, each strategy perfectly suited to his opponent's weaknesses. Jake had become something the other recruits did not understand. He was not just fighting anymore. He was solving problems, but Jake's transformation went beyond combat skills. He started using the station's own training methods against the other recruits. When Dex complained about the food, Jake suggested he was not trying hard enough to appreciate what he had been given. When another recruit showed fear before a dangerous exercise, Jake would stare at him with cold eyes until the fear turned into shame. "You are changing," Dex said to Jake one evening in the eating hall. "You used to be different, kinder." Jake looked up from his meal. "Kind does not survive here. Kind gets you sent home in pieces. But you are becoming like them. Like the instructors. Maybe that is what it takes." Dex shook his head. "I do not think your people would recognize you now." Jake's face did not change expression. "My people do not matter. Only the mission matters." The other recruits started to avoid Jake. He did not seem to notice or care. He spent his free time in the training hall, practicing movements, over and over until they were perfect. He read tactical manuals and studied recordings of famous battles. He pushed his body until it operated at the very edge of what was possible. Vexka watched all of this with growing interest. The human was no longer the weak creature that had arrived months ago. He was becoming something else, something dangerous. Human, Vexka said one day after training. Walk with me. They left the training hall and walked through the corridors of the station. Vexka led Jake to an observation deck where they could look out at the stars. Do you know why this training exists? Vexka asked. To make soldiers, sir. No, any species can make soldiers. This training makes something more. It makes weapons. Living weapons that can think and adapt and survive anything. Jake said nothing, waiting for the alien to continue. Most beings break before they reach that point. They hold on to their old selves, their old ways of thinking, but you... Vexka turned to look at Jake. You let your old self die. You became something new. Is that good or bad, sir? That depends on who controls the weapon. They stood in silence for a while, looking out at the endless darkness of space. Finally, Vexka spoke again. Your final test is coming soon. If you pass, you will graduate from this program. You will be the first human to complete Vorthek military training. And if I fail, you will die. Vexka's yellow eyes reflected the starlight. But I do not think you will fail. I think you have become too dangerous to fail. What is the test? Sir? Vexka's mouth opened in that sharp-toothed smile. Single combat. To the death. Against an instructor of your choice. Jake felt something cold move through his chest. Any instructor? Any instructor. Jake turned to look at Vexka. The alien was bigger, stronger, and more experienced. He had weapons and armor that Jake could never match. Fighting him would be almost impossible. I choose you, sir. Vexka's smile grew wider. I was hoping you would say that. When? Tomorrow. After the morning meal. In the main arena, so all the recruits and instructors can watch. Vexka started to walk away, then stopped. Human? Yes, sir. Do not disappoint me. Jake stood alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Tomorrow he would face the creature that had tormented him for months. Tomorrow he would try to kill the being that had nearly killed him. Tomorrow he would find out if the weapon he had become was sharp enough to cut through scales and bone and the reputation of the most feared instructor on Kepler Station. Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of something that had learned to hunt. The stars watched him in silence, cold and distant and uncaring. Just like Jake had become, the main arena was packed. Every recruit sat in the viewing area above the fighting floor. All the instructors stood along the walls, their eyes fixed on the center of the room where Jake waited. Even the station commander had come to watch. Jake stood perfectly still in the middle of the arena. He wore no armor, carried no weapons except for a single combat knife. His breathing was slow and steady. His face showed no emotion at all. Vexka entered from the opposite side of the arena. The big alien wore full combat armor that gleamed under the bright lights. He carried a plasma rifle in one hand and a molecular blade in the other. The crowd murmured as they saw the difference in equipment. This is not fair, Dex whispered. To the other recruits, the human has no chance. Look at his eyes, Korak said quietly. Something has changed in the human. Something dangerous. Vexka walked to the center of the arena until he stood 20 feet away from Jake. Are you ready to die, human? Are you ready to find out if you can kill me? Jake replied. The station commander stepped forward. This is single combat to the death. No mercy will be shown. No quarter will be given. The fight ends when one combatant. To no longer continue, he looked at both fighters. Begin. Vexka raised his plasma rifle and fired. The energy bolt screamed across the arena, aimed directly at Jake's chest. Jake was not there when it arrived. He had moved the instant the commander said begin, throwing himself to the side and rolling behind a metal barrier. The plasma bolt hit the arena wall, leaving a smoking crater in the steel. You cannot hide forever, human, Vexka called out. He fired 3 more shots, each one blasting chunks out of Jake's cover. Jake said nothing. He was studying the arena, mapping out every Piece of equipment, every shadow, every place where he could move without being seen. The arena was designed for combat, but it was also designed for training. That meant there were rules, patterns, things he could use. Dexka fired again. This time the plasma bolt went completely through Jake's barrier, missing his head by inches. The metal was getting too hot, too damaged to provide protection much longer. Jake moved again, sprinting from his cover to another barrier on the far side of the arena. Dexka tracked him with the rifle, firing shot after shot. Each blast came closer than the last. Running like a scared animal, Dexka laughed. Is this what humans call bravery? Jake rolled behind a training dummy and caught his breath. The plasma rifle had a limited power source. Each shot drained the battery a little more. Dexka was powerful but not patient. He would keep firing. Until the weapon was empty, more plasma bolts tore through the arena. One of them hit so close to Jake that his hair caught fire. He patted out the flames and kept moving, always staying just ahead of the deadly energy beams. Finally, Jake heard the sound he had been waiting for. The high whine of an empty power cell. Dexka's rifle was dead. Jake stood up from behind his cover. Out of ammunition? Dexka threw the useless rifle aside and pulled out his molecular blade. The weapon hummed with energy, its edge sharp enough to cut through anything. I do not need a gun to kill you, human. No, Jake said, pulling out his knife. You probably do not. They circled each other in the center of the arena. Dexka was bigger, stronger, better armed, and covered in armor. Jake was smaller, faster, and had nothing to lose. Dexka attacked first, swinging his blade in a wide arc that would have cut Jake in half. Jake ducked under the swing and slashed with his knife, but the blade bounced off the alien's armor without leaving a mark. Too weak, Dexka said. He brought his blade down in an overhead strike. Jake rolled to the side, feeling the wind from the weapon as it passed by his shoulder. Jake came up running, circling around Dexka and looking for weak points in the armor, the joints where the plates connected, the gaps around the neck and arms, places where his knife might actually do damage. Dexka spun around, tracking Jake's movement. His blade came up in an uppercut that nearly took Jake's head off. Jake leaned backward, the edge passing so close to his face that he could feel its heat. Jake's knife found a gap in the armor at Dexka's elbow. The blade went in deep, drawing dark blood. Dexka roared in pain and anger, swinging his weapon wildly. First blood to the human. Someone in the crowd whispered. Dexka's next attack was more careful, more controlled. He used his reach advantage to keep Jake at a distance, forcing the human to dodge and weave without getting close enough. To strike back, Jake's enhanced lungs and artificial heart kept him moving when a normal human would have collapsed from exhaustion. But even with his improvements, he was getting tired. Dexka seemed to have endless energy. The molecular blade caught Jake across the ribs, slicing through his shirt and drawing a line of blood across his chest. Jake stumbled backward, gasping. In pain, getting tired, human? Dexka pressed his attack, driving Jake back against the arena wall. Jake had nowhere left to run. Dexka raised his blade for a killing strike. Jake did the only thing he could do. He threw himself forward, inside the reach of the longer weapon. Dexka's blade came down, but it hit the arena wall instead of Jake's head. Jake's knife went up, finding the gap under Dexka's arm where the armor was thinnest. Both fighters froze for a moment. Dexka looked down at the knife buried in his side. Jake looked up at the molecular blade embedded in the wall inches from his face. Interesting, Dexka said. He grabbed Jake around the throat with his free hand and lifted him off the ground. Jake could not breathe. Dexka's grip was crushing his windpipe. Black spots started to dance in his vision. But his hands were still free and his knife was still in Dexka's body. Jake twisted the blade, driving it deeper. Dexka's grip loosened slightly. Jake twisted again, feeling the knife find something vital inside the alien's body. Dexka dropped Jake and staggered backward. Dark blood was pouring from the wound in his side. His yellow eyes were wide with shock and pain. You actually hurt me, he said. I am just getting started, Jake replied, pulling out a second knife he had hidden in his boot. Vexka looked down at his wound, then back at Jake. For the first time since the fight began, uncertainty showed in his eyes. You planned this. All of it. I told you I was watching. I told you I was learning. Jake started moving again, circling like a predator. I learned that your armor is strongest in front but weaker on the sides. I learned that you favor your right hand and drop your guard when you get angry. I learned that you have a blind spot on your left. Vexka tried to track Jake's movement, but the wound in his side was slowing him down. Blood loss was making him dizzy. I learned something else too, Jake continued. I learned that you are not as strong as you pretend to be. You're just a bully who picks on things smaller than you. Vexka roared in rage and charged forward, swinging his blade with both hands. It was exactly what Jake had been waiting for. The alien was angry now, sloppy, making mistakes. Jake stepped into Vexka's blind spot and drove his second knife up under the alien's jaw. The blade found the gap between helmet and chest armor, sliding between scales and into the soft tissue underneath. Vexka's molecular blade fell from his hands. He reached up toward the knife in his throat, but his arms were not working properly anymore. His legs gave out and he fell to his knees. How? He whispered, blood flowing from his mouth. I became what you made me, Jake said. I became a weapon. Vexka's eyes went dark. He fell forward onto the arena floor and did not move. Again, Jake stood over the body of his instructor, breathing hard. Blood dripped from his wounds onto the metal floor. The arena was completely silent. Then Jake did something that shocked everyone watching. He reached down and grabbed Vexka under the arms. With great effort, he lifted the heavy body and slung it across his shoulders. Step by slow step, Jake carried Vexka's body across the arena. His legs shook with the effort. His wounds reopened and started bleeding again. But he did not stop, did not fall, did not give up. He carried his instructor's body all the way to the exit, where he gently placed it on the ground. Only then did he allow himself to collapse. The crowd erupted in noise. Some cheered, some gasped, some sat in stunned silence. No one had ever seen anything like this before. The station commander walked over to where Jake lay on the ground. Can you stand, human? Jake slowly got to his feet. His whole body was shaking, but he managed to stay upright. You have completed the training program, the commander said. You are the first human to survive Vorthek military instruction. What do you have to say? Jake looked around the arena at all the faces staring at him. Recruits, instructors, aliens from dozens of different worlds. All of them were looking at him like he was something new, something they had never seen before. I have learned what you wanted me to learn, Jake said. I hope you are happy with what you have created. He walked toward the exit, still carrying himself like a soldier despite his wounds. As he passed the viewing area, he heard Dex whisper to the other recruits, "That is not the same human who came here." Jake paused for a moment. "No," he said without turning around. "It is not." He walked out of the arena and into the corridor. Beyond. Behind him, the crowd continued to stare at the place where he had been standing. Jake Martinez had arrived at Kepler Station as a human being. He was leaving as something else entirely.